It was the summer I turned 33, a season that felt like a turning point, though I couldn't quite explain why. By then, I had been married for almost a decade. Our marriage, which had once been a passionate whirlwind of love and adventure, had quietly transformed into something else entirely. The thrill, the spark that had once been so vibrant, had faded into a muted routine. David and I still shared a home, divided the responsibilities of daily life, and even enjoyed each other's company in a familiar, comforting way. Yet, the intimacy we had once cherished seemed like a distant memory. The romantic connection that had once bound us had slowly unraveled, and our physical relationship had become mechanical, then infrequent and finally non-existent. One evening, after another dinner that felt like a replay of countless others, leftover lasagna eaten in silence, I decided it was time to confront the growing gap between us. David was on the couch, his attention fixed on a crime drama playing on the TV. His feet were comfortably propped up on the coffee table, and he seemed completely absorbed in the show. Nervously, I sat down next to him, my fingers twisting together as I tried to gather the courage to speak. "David, can we talk?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady and calm, not wanting to sound too dramatic. He muted the TV and turned to me, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "Talk? This sounds serious," he said, his lopsided grin familiar but somehow distant. "It kind of is," I replied, feeling my heart flutter in my chest. "It's about us, about our intimacy." The humor in his eyes faded, and he let out a long, tired sigh. "Emily, come on. We've been married for 10 years. What do you expect? Passion doesn't last forever. Not after kids, bills, and a decade of seeing each other in sweatpants." His tone was almost dismissive, as though he had accepted this reality long ago and couldn't understand why I was bringing it up now. I bit my lip, refusing to let his indifference deter me. "But it doesn't have to be like this," I insisted. "We could try to reignite that spark. We could make an effort." He looked at me with a mixture of sympathy and exhaustion. "If it makes you feel better, sure, we can try." He paused, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly. "But, if you really feel like you need more, I won't stop you, just as long as I never hear about it." He let out a strained laugh, as though he was trying to make light of the situation, but his words landed like a blow. I forced a smile and let the conversation trail off, but inside, I felt hollow. His casual indifference hurt more than I wanted to admit. The fact that he wasn't willing to fight for us cut deep. And yet, part of me understood. Life had worn us both down, chipped away at the passion we once had, until we were left with something that felt more like a partnership of convenience than a marriage. A few weeks later, my friend Jessica invited me to an art gallery event. It was one of those pretentious gatherings where people stood around with glasses of wine, pretending to understand abstract art while making small talk. I saw it as a chance to escape the heavy thoughts weighing me down. A night out, away from the house, away from the quiet despair of my marriage. That's where I met him. Oliver. He stood out in the crowd, like someone who had stepped out of an old French film. His dark, wavy hair fell just above his shoulders, and he wore a vintage hat and an unbuttoned linen shirt that made him look effortlessly charming. His glasses gave him an intellectual air, as though he was always pondering something profound. He was an artist, of course. When he spoke, his voice was smooth and velvety, each word carrying a kind of poetic weight. We started talking about the pieces in the gallery, then about art in general, and eventually about life. He made me laugh. The kind of laughter that made my cheeks ache, something I hadn't experienced in a long time. By the end of the night, we had exchanged numbers, and before I knew it, we were texting each other every day. It felt exhilarating, like being a teenager again. Oliver would send me sketches of the projects he was working on, and I would reply with pictures of the flowers blooming in my garden. Soon, our conversations moved from text to secret meetings. We attended concerts, walked along the river, and talked about everything and nothing. Each moment felt charged with a kind of energy I had almost forgotten existed. One afternoon, we sat on a bench in the park, the sun filtering through the leaves. He looked at me, his intense brown eyes locking onto mine. "Emily, you're beautiful. You know that?" I laughed, shaking my head. "You're just saying that because I listened to you ramble about your paintings." "No, I mean it," he said, his voice soft and serious. "You have the spark, like you're waiting to explode with life. You deserve more than what you're getting." His words pierced through me deeper than I expected. In that moment, I felt seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. I knew then that I wanted to be with him, even if it meant breaking the unspoken rules of my marriage. We started an affair. For a while, it was everything I had been missing. I felt alive, desired, adventurous. Oliver would bring me flowers, and we'd spend hours in his studio, tangled together, sharing dreams we had never dared to voice out loud. The secrecy added an edge of excitement, making every moment feel electric. But as the months went by, the thrill began to fade. What had once felt intoxicating started to feel heavy, burdened by the weight of guilt and secrecy. I could sense David's quiet suspicion, though he never confronted me. Oliver, too, began to seem distant. The intensity we had shared started to disappear, leaving behind an emptiness I couldn't ignore. The shadows of our choices loomed over us, unspoken but undeniable. That evening, as we sat together in his dimly lit studio, the silence between us felt heavier than usual. The soft glow of a single lamp cast long shadows on the walls, making everything feel both intimate and distant at the same time. I could feel the words I needed to say forming in my chest, each syllable pressing harder against my heart, begging to be released. My hands trembled slightly as I finally found my voice. "Oliver," I began, my voice barely above a whisper, "I think we need to stop." The words felt like stones dropping into a still pond, creating ripples that spread through the room. My eyes met his, searching for some sign of understanding, some flicker of recognition that he felt it too. Confusion crossed his face, his brows furrowing as he processed what I had just said. His lips parted, as if to protest, but then he closed his mouth, a heavy sigh escaping instead. Slowly he nodded, the sadness in his eyes mirroring my own. "I felt it too," he admitted, his voice soft, almost broken. "The spark, it's just not the same anymore, is it?" Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring the sight of him. I blinked them away, but one escaped, trailing down my cheek. "No," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "I can't keep doing this to my family. It's not fair to them." He reached out, his fingertips brushing away the tear that had fallen. The tenderness in his touch made the moment even more painful. "I'm going to miss you, Emily," he said, his voice rough with unspoken emotions. "I'm going to miss you too," I replied, my voice cracking under the weight of our shared history. We sat there in the silence that followed, holding each other as if we could delay the inevitable, as if our embrace could somehow make the goodbye easier. But we both knew this was the end. It hurt more than I had expected, a deep, aching loss that settled in my chest. But deep down, we both knew it was the right thing to do. Back home, the atmosphere had shifted. There was a quiet tension that hadn't been there before, a fragile truce, unspoken but felt in every glance. David never asked any questions, but I knew he suspected something. He wasn't naive. The tension between us was almost tangible, filling the spaces between our conversations and lingering in the quiet moments. I tried to find my way back to him, to the version of us that existed before everything had fallen apart, but it wasn't easy. Sometimes I'd catch him watching me, his gaze lingering longer than usual, filled with a mixture of curiosity and something else, something I couldn't quite decipher. Sadness, perhaps, or maybe relief. It was hard to tell. One night, after putting the kids to bed, I found the courage to break the silence that had grown between us like a wall. "David," I said, my voice trembling, "can we try again?" He looked up from the chair where he sat, really looked at me, and for the first time in what felt like forever, there was something in his eyes, something other than indifference. He sighed, leaning back, his hands clasped together in his lap. Emily, I don't know. I want to, but it's hard. We both made mistakes. Tears pricked at my eyes again, my throat tightening. I know, I whispered, the words almost catching in my throat. But I'm willing to try if you are. He was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. A small, hesitant smile tugged at the corners of his lips. I guess we can give it a shot, he said. We've been through worse, right? I let out a soft, shaky laugh, wiping my tears away. Yeah, I guess we have. So, that's where we are now, trying. It's not perfect, not by any stretch. Some days, I still wonder if we're doing the right thing, but we're giving it a chance. I've come to realize that marriage isn't always about grand gestures or passionate moments. Sometimes it's about finding your way back to each other, even when it feels impossible. It's in the small moments, the quiet gestures, that speak louder than words. Like David making my favorite tea without being asked, or me sitting next to him on the couch while he watches his crime dramas. Even though I still don't understand why he likes them so much. Maybe we'll make it. Maybe we won't. But for now, we're trying, and that has to be enough. A few months after things began to settle, David suggested we take a family trip, just the four of us. We need to get away from everything, he said, his voice filled with cautious hope. To reconnect, we packed up the car and drove to a secluded cabin by the lake. The drive was quiet, the silence between us heavy with everything left unsaid. At first, the awkwardness was palpable. The kids felt it too, their laughter subdued, their eyes flickering between us with quiet curiosity. But slowly, things began to shift. We played board games together, roasted marshmallows over the fire, and took long hikes through the woods. One night, after the kids had fallen asleep, David and I sat on the porch, the night sky stretching out above us. You know, he said softly, his voice barely cutting through the silence, I was really angry at you for a long time. I looked down, my heart tightening. I know, I whispered, my voice thick with regret. I was angry at myself too. He reached over, his hand finding mine. I think I understand why you did it. I'm not saying it was okay, but I get it. I wasn't there for you, was I? Tears welled up again, and I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. We both made mistakes, David. I wanted to feel something again. He nodded, his thumb gently brushing over my knuckles. I know, and I want to make things better, for the kids, but also for us. I leaned my head on his shoulder, the tears finally falling. I want that too. It wasn't a grand gesture, and it didn't magically fix everything, but it was a start, a small step toward something better. Back home, life slowly settled into a new rhythm. We were gentler with each other, more patient. David started leaving little notes for me on the bathroom mirror, the fridge, even tucked into my purse. Simple messages that meant everything. Hope you have a great day, or thanks for being you. I found myself doing the same. I made his favorite breakfast on Sundays, sat with him through his crime dramas, even if I still found them boring. One afternoon with the kids at a friend's house, David came into the kitchen, his arms wrapping around me from behind. You know, he whispered, his voice playful, I think I'm falling in love with you all over again. I turned to look at him, a smile breaking through. Oh yeah? Even after everything. Especially after everything, he said, pressing a kiss to my cheek. We're both imperfect. Maybe that's what makes us work. I laughed, shaking my head. You're such a sap, he grinned, spinning me around to face him. But you love it. And he was right. I did love it. I loved him. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to keep us going one day at a time.